So we're still in our Esther series, Divine Reversal. Such a beautiful narration of God's goodness in the life of His people, even though we do not see the name of God in this book. But it is so apparent and obvious that He is there behind the scene, working the angles, pursuing His purpose for His people. So it is like in our times today, diba? You don't see the name of God everywhere. You just see you see the name of God in churches. But in schools, they have already taken out the name of God. In government, you don't dare to mention it because it's politically correct and all that stuff. But then it does not undermine God's presence. They can take out the name if they want to, but God is still behind the scene working His purpose. Isn't that great, brothers and sisters? So open your hearts and your minds, and let's go on to our conversation in Esther. So the civil trial of the century, it is all over social media platform, and I've been one of those that are puyat-puyat watching this trial because of its poetical tone in it. JD sued his wife for defamation. At the end of the verdict, JD was found victorious with all his claims against former wife or ex-wife AH. Well, in my opinion, I'm sure there is the other side of it, but in my opinion and observation of the trial, it was indeed a poetic justice for JD. For many of us, we somehow have been in the same boat, that we have been accused of lies, or maybe we are accused of troublemaking and all of that stuff. But we are no celebrity that we cannot take it to court. But in our own little injustices or justices in our lives, what do we do when we are being accused in that manner? So no one here is exempted. Somehow, one way or another, we have been accused, we have been bashed, we have been misinterpreted. What do? We cannot take it to court, right? Here we will learn in Esther chapter 7 how God has shown us what to do and what to avoid, so that when that time comes, we will basically know what to do. So, the title of our sermon today, or our conversation, is Poetic Justice. What is poetic justice? Have you heard about this term before? In fact, the New York Times calls poetic justice as karmic shock. The antagonist in the story got what they deserve. And this is what the world and how the world interprets poetic justice to be, that you got what you deserve. It's about good overcoming the bad. Thomas Reimer is a 7th century critic. He was the one who first coined the word poetic justice, that any work of literature should uphold moral principles and instruct the reader in correct moral behavior, that it should be pretty much obvious to the reader. Does the Bible talk about poetic justice? Definitely, it does not use the term poetic justice. However, there are many evidences that shows us that God's justice is perfect, first and foremost, in a poetic way. Though the Bible doesn't use the term, but the description of the justice and the perfect justice of God has shown us that indeed His justice is also in a poetic way. Take, for example, Joseph. If you remember the story of Joseph. And what happened at the end of the story? He was vindicated. He was raised to power. He was made an official that will eventually save his brothers and his family from famine and from destruction. So the tables have turned for Joseph. Even the life of Job, if you remember Job, right? Job, Satan took away everything he has, his children, his livelihood. He even bestowed a disease on his skin. But did he curse God? No, he continued to trust God. But the end of the day, God restored everything and shamed Satan by proving him that indeed Job was a faithful man. In spite of taking away everything he had, he still continued to honor and glorify his Creator. Our justice in our world today is not perfect. Sometimes you can manipulate evidence. Sometimes even the judge can be bought, the juries can be biased. It is not a perfect justice, but God has His perfect justice, His eyes on us, because He cannot accept sin. It is not in His nature to allow wrong to be wrong. He will always make wrong the right. And that is the justice of God. And you see that on the cross. The cross is just not about the redemption of man. The cross is also about justice. God, in His character, righteousness, and holy, will not accept any evil. Yes, in this world, there are evil things still happening, but at the end of the day, God sees everything. He is behind the scene, watching and giving and bestowing justice to everyone who needs it. So to sum it all up, God, who is the ultimate decision maker, has the power to overturn any verdict. His perfect justice will make it right and dramatically show it. His dramatic hand or His ways of justice, somehow He allows us to fall into our own trap. He doesn't need to do anything. And it is man's demise. It is our own demise that we fall into our own trap. That's how poetic justice works for God. He allows us to make the mistake. But at the end of the day, you've got what we've deserved. We've got what we deserved. That is the dramatic way of God showing justice. We don't have courts, we don't have judges, but in our own little way, He allows us to make that mistake and thus giving us that poetic justice, the justice that we deserve. So, a sobering reminder for us today as we study the book of Esther, chapter 7, we will see here the reminder and the warning that we face each day and how we decide and how we pursue one's affair to each and to our relationships. Before you make any actions, decisions, this is the truth that we need to be reminded, that we lose our wisdom when we are troublesome. Somehow the poetic justice of God in our lives is that we don't have the ability to think right anymore. When pride comes in and sets in our hearts and greed sets in our hearts and we are up to getting someone, then we lose our ability to think right. Thus, we lose our wisdom. Because wisdom comes from God. He is the source of wisdom. Just to put us on the same page, let me define wisdom. So, of course, wisdom is common sense. The common sense that we have, that's basically wisdom. You see a wet chair, you won't sit on a wet chair, right? That's common sense. That's wisdom. If you lose your ability to think, you'd sit on the wet chair, right? You won't. That's common sense. We have the inherent ability to acquire knowledge. That's why we read books, we go to school, we acquire knowledge. That's part of the wisdom we have here now, inherent in us, the common sense that we have. And with the experience that we have, plus the knowledge that we acquire, we tend to make the right decisions. Or sometimes not. That's why may kasabihan, why did you not learn from your mistakes, right? It's because you did not weigh things properly. The knowledge that you know and experience did not match up. Therefore, you made the wrong decisions. So it is not foolproof. Our common sense is not foolproof because sometimes we don't learn from our mistakes. We don't learn from our experience. So therefore, what happens? We make the wrong decisions. But what is godly wisdom? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It comes from God. It's a gift. It is a gift of discernment in our lives that stems out in a holy life. Even James tells us, ask for wisdom because it's not inherently there. The godly wisdom is not inherently there. You ask for wisdom each time you face troubles of many kinds, right? You ask for wisdom so that God can guide you. But it does just not happen. It has to stem out from a holy life, a holy living, so that when we come to a decision, we make the right decision. So that is the wisdom that we are talking about here. Not common sense. We are talking about the godly wisdom. We lose that. We lose that once pride sets in and we make trouble. What is a troublemaker? Mahirap define ang troublemaker, right? Psalm 7 describes it to be as a person who think up evil, who plants trouble, who tells lies, and dig a hole to trap others. That is what a troublemaker is. He is an instigator. He is one that will plan your demise. He is one that will probably in our times today text you of hate and bash you on social media. There are many ways to instigate evil, lies. They plan trouble and trap others to do the same. The violence that they caused will hurt only themselves. So eventually, the poetic justice of God in our lives is that we lose our wisdom when we are troublesome. So a sobering reminder for all of us, before we get our text, before we write that letter, before we type that email, sobering reminder for all of us today that we can lose such wisdom. And it happened to many of us. Our experience, there are so many experiences that we've seen how God poetically, His justice was done in a poetic way. It's amazing. Sometimes they fall into their own words. Weird. We didn't even do anything. It was their wisdom that they lost that placed them in such big trouble. Now, going back to the story of Esther, okay, let's just take a look back and see this character so that somehow we will understand what Haman really did. No, I mean we've always the antagonist in the story is Haman or Haman, let's see what really happened to him in the past. No, so Haman revealed to us his ungodly character. And we know this in chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. We'd see that he would plan against Mordecai because Mordecai, as we know, did not honor him or did not bow down to him. Therefore, he was angry and enraged, right? And this hatred in his heart just built up, continually built up, until his hatred was no longer for Mordecai. It was extended to the Jewish people. He had nothing against the Jewish people. It was against Mordecai. But because of his ungodly character, his pride, his greed, what happened? He included the Jewish people. If you were here in the first few chapters, remember there was these two guys or two guards who was plotting against the king. What happened to them in the end when they were found out? They were impaled on a pole. So it seems like that the pole as punishment in the time of King Xerxes is a common thing. It's a form of punishment. But what's weird and bewildering of what Haman did, yes, he built the pole, which is common for his enemy, but he brought it up to 75 feet. I mean, yes, a pole, maybe this size is appropriate, but he went higher, way, way higher, and I believe that it is to challenge God Himself, reaching to the heavens and saying, I am challenging the people of God and their God. Though again, not explicitly said in Esther, because there's no mention of God, but the action of Haman tells us that loudly and clearly. We will see that his pride will get the best of him. His greed will get the best of him. And we left off in chapter 6. Tita Barry spoke chapter 6 of Esther, and she left us with these verses just before it ended. It says that after Mordecai returned to the king's gate, remember, Mordecai has been honored, right? And Haman thought that it was him that will be honored. And he even gave a prescription of how to do it. But at the end of the day, it was Mordecai. So after this, Mordecai returned to the gate. Now, why the gate? We've seen that several times. Mordecai's at the gate. He's always at the gate. There was a time he couldn't enter the gate because he was in sackcloth. Why the gate? See, the gate is where a lot of people assemble. And I think there were, although not mentioned of what he is really doing there, but it is believed in historical knowledge and historical evidences that a lot of counselors take their civil complaints or whatever in the gate of the king's gate, and it's 100, maybe 100 feet wide, or 130 feet long, and 100 feet high. I don't know, but it's long, it's big, it's huge. So there are many people, kind of foreigners there at the gate. And one of them is Mordecai, probably giving counsel, giving advices to his people. And that is why there are so many people there. That's why he heard of the plot. But what did Mordecai do? He went back to his gate, showing humility. It did not get to his head. He went back to work. But there's a contrast here. But Haman rushed home with his head covered. Remember, before he was head held high, now his face was covered, ashamed, and told Zeresh, his wife, and all of his friends everything that had happened. And sometimes we're like that. When trouble comes our way, we need to say it. We need to put it on our timeline that we're so angry. 2,000 people are wondering, why are you so angry? Who is this person that you're talking about? We are bewildered. Have you experienced that? You open your Facebook or your Instagram and this hate message comes as if it was talking to you. And another person reads it, it's talking to me. And 2,000 people are wondering, who is this person? So we have this attitude of rushing. If ever we're grieved or angry, we take it to the social media. Similarly to why the sensation of JD and AH, they took it to the media. They took it to the social media. And everyone, 16 billion, are involved. They even signed a petition. 4 million people signed the petition for AH to be removed from Aquaman. So we rush. Exactly. We rush because we're angry. We have to do something. We cannot just sit back. We need to say it to the world that we're angry and protesting, right? So that's where we left off. But one sobering thing in chapter 6, verse 13. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin." This is a warning. Meaning they have heard what God has done in the lives of his people. They must have been, the dearest probably reference was the Jewish people was sent back to their own homeland. It was the work of God. I'm sure they have seen and recognized the story of Daniel and his 3 friends. It was still fresh in their mind. They know that Haman was up against God himself. This is the start of your downfall. When we put our fist against God and we do not respect and fear Him, it is a start of our downfall. You cannot stand against Him. He is the God of justice. He is a righteous God. He may not be seen, but His hand is there. And His justice comes in a poetic way. And we anchor that with chapter 7. I'm sure excited na kayo sa chapter 7. So let's start chapter 7. So the king and Haman went to the queen Esther's banquet. Remember, just after that, the eunuchs came and dragged Haman to, not naman drag, but pulled him. Hey, we have the queen's banquet. We have to go. Without even processing what he just heard, that it is his downfall. Okay? So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, so it was the second day of the banquet that was given for the king by Esther, the king asked Queen Esther, "What is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even half of the kingdom, it will be granted." I think this is the third time. Pag hindi pa niya to sinagot, Sister Irene will come up here and smack Esther. But again, we see such wisdom here. See, Esther, before even this situation happened, he asked Mordecai and his people to pray to God and fast for 3 days. Why the second day? Why Esther has not accepted the request is because she's waiting for the timing, when the timing is right. Probably she was saying to herself, I will not get this chance again. Makukulitan na sa akin the king. And basically may not even ask me anymore. Queen Esther answered. Dun, 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 dun. Eto na. Dapat may music, no? Kasi I don't think I give it justice when I tell the story. But if there's music and nice voice, and this will be more dramatic. And the Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, such an humble position, Your Majesty, if it pleases you, grant my life. This is my petition. Spare my people. This is my request." You know, she could actually just request right away because she can leverage on what the king is. I think she knows that the king is pleased on her. But then she still subject herself to the king's view by saying, if I have found favor with you, if it pleases you, grant my life. So her stance was not boastful. It was not a rash act. It was full of the right choice of words, the right, and I'm sure this wisdom is coming from God. The hand that they cannot see, the name that they cannot hear, the wisdom is there. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. The queen now is no longer a queen on her own right. She included now her people. She is now not just the queen in Susa, but she's the queen of her people. I and my people. She took that responsibility. First, she did not like. She was afraid. But when she seeked God and the advice of Mordecai, she finally realized, I am here at such a time as this. And he told the king, I and my people have been sold to be destroyed. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet because no such distress should justify disturbing the king. Did you see? You see her stance here. It is not justifiable if we are sold as slave to even disturb you, king. I know it. You don't merit that disturbance, but it is my life. It is our people. We are going to be killed and destroyed. And I like you to notice the word here. We have been sold to be killed and destroyed. You have been duped, in other words. You have been lied to. The king is not an instigator. He did not instigate this, but it was instigated by Haman. And it was sold to the king that you need to destroy them to get their properties, their riches. Annihilate them because their worship or their style of living is different. That's the justification of Haman. We have been dispersed so many times. We have been a slave in so many countries so many times. It's not an issue. But spare my life and my people's life. And such wisdom on the way she told the king. Did you hear Haman's name here? You did not hear even blaming the king. King, it's you. You gave the edict. She did not even blame the king. She did not even mention Haman or the king. She was ready not to even put them into trouble. Right? But what happened? God did not allow it. King Xerxes asked, "Who is he?" If the king did not ask, Esther would not say, "Who is he? Where is he? The man who has dared to do such a thing, who has stirred up trouble for you, my queen. Who?" Where's Haman? He's beside the king, right? Siguro, kung cartoon yun, ano, nanginginig na yung ano niya. Lahat nag-shake na yan, di ba? Yung mga buto-buto niya. It's rattling in fear. Who is he? Where is he? That's the most important part. Imagine that Haman in a predicament. He did not know and realize that he would be there. He was still licking his wounds regarding Mordecai's honor. He was still in grief and bothered by what just happened the other day. And now here, the king asked, "Who is he? Where is he?" I think the king even put himself in a difficult situation. I think at this point, the king does not remember his edict. Otherwise, he will not ask. He knows where he is. He knows who it is. But I think here, the king did not remember. He was still processing what Esther was saying. Esther said, "An adversary, the enemy, this vile Haman." Then Haman was terrified. Hindi na talagang rattled siya before the king and the queen. The description of the exchange of the king and Esther is likened into a staccato. Sometimes when you read, just like Thomas Reimer would like to exaggerate, the bad gets the worst of it. Somehow here, it is not justifiable just to read it. That's why you need thunder and lightning supposedly going through this. And the exchange between the king and Esther was very unique. It is just not like a melody that you sing. Like when you sing, 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 sing. It's more than that. It's zing, zing. It's like that. It's staccato. It's like a loud exchange here and there with thunder and lightning. Hindi ko, kulang ang drama. Next time we'll put if you watch the YouTube video, I'll put some thunder and lightning there so that you feel the intense of this exchange. Our enemy, this vile, evil Haman, there beside you. Where? There. Who? Haman. Kawawa naman si Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. He finally saw that he was before the king and queen. Kumbaga nilagay siya ni Lord sa lugar niya. He was brought in a position that he was now before no longer his friend, but the king, no longer his enemy, but the queen. You realize something here. Remember, they did not mention of the Jewish nationality of Esther. It wasn't an issue to the king. Because in his kingdom, there was already a lot of foreigners. It doesn't matter. Mordecai probably mentioned that to protect her from people like Haman. Because there were there in the kingdom palace, within the palace, enemies of God's people. But it was really not to hide it from the king. Because the king did not take issue. You did not hear the king say, "What? You're a Jew?" No, it was not an issue to the king. So the king got up in rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, here it is again. But Haman, realizing that the king has already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Now, on the onset, is this a wise choice for Haman? We'll see later. We'll see. But let's focus on the king first. What did the king do? He got up and what? He left his wine. Usually, when we are upset, we drink wine to forget. When we are in trouble, we drink to forget. Maglalasing tayo. Remember those days? O ako lang. Kayo ha, kala nyo nakalusot kayo ha. What do? We drink with our friends. Happy hour. And a lot of JD's predicaments started with wine. That is why the king is full of wisdom. Never mind his common sense. We know it comes from God. He left his wine. Why? He went out, maybe to process, maybe to think clearly. Wait, what just happened? What should I do? I was the one who gave the edict. Oh my goodness. Oh, Haman, did Haman trick me? What just happened? Was I duped? Oh my, I have hurt the queen. So this was all going on in his mind. Bubble, bubble, bubble everywhere. Imagine that. But look at the contrast. Haman realizing he stayed behind. That's a no-no. There is a rule in the palace that when the queen or the king is out, no one stays with the queen except the king. So if the king exits, everybody exits. But what did Haman? Wala nang wisdom. He lost it. He lost his ability, realizing that the king had already decided is wrong. Because he could have followed the king and say, "King, I'm sorry, I did not know your queen was one of them. Oh, I'm so sorry, but let's just avoid this altogether and let's start anew. Please forgive me." That could have happened in the garden, right? There's such a possibility. But what did Haman do? He decided to stay behind, which is a no-no. Wala ng wisdom. He lost his ability to think. He cannot think anymore. He realized that the king has already sealed his fate. But that wasn't really true. Going back to the garden, contemplating, how then justice will be served when the king realizes that let's just avoid this edict and move on. Forgiving Haman, justice will not be served, right? But God is the God of justice. Poetic justice. Haman realizing he begged for his life. According to scholars, He draped the couch. He draped the couch of Esther. He was all over the place, according to one Bible scholars. He was crying, begging. See, Queen Esther has no authority to bestow life. Can you not realize that she has no power to even give whatever Haman any verdict? She wasn't the judge. The king has the authority. So even though what he did here was useless, no ability to think. Now, justice has to be served. Just as the king returned from the palace to the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman, bad optics, split screen, coming. Haman falling, begging for his life, falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. You remember that before we started chapter 7, this will be your downfall. Such a poetic justice. This is such a downfall. We see Haman falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. One of the Jewish writings says that angel Gabriel pushed Haman so Haman would fall. Ganon. Haman fell on the couch. Kawawa naman. So the king entered, right? And saw Haman, bad optics, walang wisdom. You know, he could have done the other way around. He could have done the other option, right? Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Will he even molest the queen? There was no longer a relationship. He was speaking on third party basis. Wala na. Will he? Probably talking to his eunuchs or his guards. Will he even molest the queen in my own house? The guards already knew what to do once that word was spoken, because it was really a no-no. And what do? They covered Haman's face. Then, Harbona. Who's this Harbona? Ngayon nyo lang narinig si Harbona? Narinig nyo na ba si Harbona? Harbona was mentioned in, I think, chapter 1. He's one of the eunuch of the king. The 7 eunuch that he has, one of the king's eunuch was named Harbona. One of the king's eunuchs said, wait, I remember, Haman has set up a sharpened pole. It's natural, normal, usual, right? But wait, 75 feet tall in his own courtyard. Very personal. Haman's hate for Mordecai is so personal that he set it up in his own courtyard, meaning he is the judge, he is the jury. He intended to use it to impale Mordecai. I remind you, king, he is the man who saved the king from assassination. And this man is going to impale him in his courtyard. See, Harbona in history was remembered. Harbona was remembered as a man that did something good in history, especially when they remember this story of Esther in the history of the Jewish faith. So Harbona was remembered. He did something good. He was just a eunuch. He did not have to say anything, but he spoke up for the truth. He spoke up for the truth. The truth always wins. Then impale Haman on it. The king ordered. So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. And the king's anger subsided. There's so many stories in the Bible that tells us that a troublemaker loses his wisdom. Just in this case, sometimes we don't know, or we really are not aware of it, but when we focus on ourselves, we don't focus on others. When we look at ourselves as the one dejado, or the one that is being uh, uh, given pain and annoy, and then we retaliate, at one point or another, we lose that ability to think right. So we lose our wisdom when we are troublesome. When I was sharing this to my kids, I was trying to uh, ask them if there's anything that they like to add, or maybe see that I did not see. And my son Jairel asked me a question. Okay, you may be here today asking that question as well. He asked me, if someone has pride and has not acted on it, will that person lose his wisdom? Very good question, right? Let's say you have that pride in your heart, but you have not acted on it. Galit ka lang, but you have not acted on it. You have this greed or hate for a person, but you have not acted on it. Will you lose your wisdom? I will not answer that, but Proverbs will. Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Eventually, that pride will catch up on you so that you will act. When what happens? We lose it. We lose our wisdom. We fall into our own trap. So let's be careful. A sobering reminder. Just like in the case of JD and AH. She was caught up in her own lie. The jury of 7 believed JD because AH spoke of experiences that was over the top. We have to be careful about what we say and do. What do we do? For people who are plotting against you, this is a reminder from Galatians. Remember Galatians? We just heard the series of Galatians, and we've seen there people trying to stir up trouble for Paul, talking lies, telling untruthful things about him, plotting his downfall. And for them, don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God. You will always harvest what you plant. It will always come back to bite you again. And for those that are being ridiculed, and for those that have people pointing fingers at you and you've not done anything wrong, or maybe you did but you hindi mo sinasadya, you did not do it on purpose, but yet people are accusing you here and there, bashing you here and there. What do we do? Romans 12:19 says, do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room. Leave room for God's wrath. For it is written that it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. Make room for God to work. That is what Esther did. She did not respond right away. She did not go to the king right away and demanded that free my people, let my people live and all. She waited. She waited for God to move. And many times we don't wait. We're so eager to click the send button. We're so eager to make a statement. And that can be our downfall. We make mistakes and we don't think right anymore because we are so full of ourselves. We're just thinking of ourselves. We don't care of the consequences. Make room for God to move. Sometimes it's okay to be quiet and be still and allow God to move. So what do we do, brothers and sisters? Trust God to move in our lives. Trust God to make the change. Yes, there are times we cannot take it to court. Yes, sometimes we have to plead our case before our friends. Yes, sometimes we need to do that. But make sure that you have prayed. Made sure that you have asked the Lord. Made sure that you have asked people for advice before you even press the send button. You know what I do in a practical sense? There are times I get angry. I'm not perfect. We get irritated, like this Aquaman thingy. And many more. Sometimes me and Pastor, we quarrel. We get inis at each other. What I do, I have a sounding board. In my computer, I have notes there, a notepad. And I pour out my frustration. Even before I write an email or a letter, I would write there my frustration. Nakakainis ka, ganyan, 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 galit na galit ako sa'yo. Whatever you want to say it there. It's unfair that you do this. Why do you think of this? Why did you do this to me like that? You can write it there. And David would do that. David would plead to God, but to God, not to other people. He would do it to God. He would cry to God. Lord, it's unfair. You have a sounding board. At least doon, nabuhos mo na. The next day, pag nakita mo, sinulat ko ba yan? Sober ka na. You're sober. You realize you can lose wisdom right there and there. Easily, as you ask, it can be gone. We have to continue to ask for guidance, especially in how we deal with one another in our relationship. We need to love one another. That's no-brainer. The only thing that gets in the way is pride. Amen? And as we listen to this song, this wonderful song, make it your prayer and trust God to move.